Salutations, respective viewers. I'm George from Ireland, and here I am at the cloister of Westminster Abbey. So Westminster Abbey was begun in the early 11th century by King Edward the Confessor, and he became king in 1042 AD. Of course, it would be as an abbey. So you might not know what an abbey is. Well, this is a very historic church, but the real meaning of an abbey is a monastery, and it's a main monastery, as in monks live there or nuns live there. In this particular case, it was monks. So one abbey could have two or more priories, which is a minor monastery, which are connected to the abbey. Not physically connected, but organizationally connected. And there were Benedictine monks here. That's to say they followed the rule of St. Benedict. In the Dark Ages, St. Benedict lived in Egypt, which is a mostly Christian country at the time, and he wrote his rule book for how Benedictine monks should live. That's what's known as the rule of St. Benedict. Anyway, fast forward to 1533, Henry VIII came along and he closed down the monasteries, the dissolution of the monasteries in the 1530s after the break with Rome, after he split with the Roman Catholic Church and he set up the Church of England. Now that split with the Catholic Church, was perhaps not as traumatic as you might think, because all the clergy, all the priests, they were virtually all the same people who'd been Catholic. Priests became Anglican priests, as in, that's to say, of the Church of England, and almost all the same buildings were used. So the Catholic Church owned a third of the land in England at the time. Remember, about 8 out of 10 people were farmers at the time, so owning farmland was the key economic resource. People didn't even dig up much coal, a bit for domestic heating. There's almost no industry. So he sees that really out of avarice, but partly to fund his disastrous discretionary wars. And so the Benedictine monks were kicked out of here. At least the building wasn't destroyed, because this is right in the heart of London. Remembering that Westminster was a city, because although, yes, it was an abbey because monks were here, it also managed to be a cathedral, therefore a city has a cathedral, and in Christendom you weren't a city if you didn't have a cathedral. So London was about 5 miles east of here. That had St. Paul's Cathedral. Westminster has this one, and so there were two separate cities for centuries. There still actually is a constituency for parliamentary purposes called the cities of London and Westminster. But obviously from 1889 they were all amalgamated. The City of London, the City of Westminster, about 32 boroughs, mostly of Middlesex. That county is abolished. Took some boroughs, as in towns, out of the county of Kent and the county of Surrey, and just created Greater London. So, anyway, what was I going to say? I'll show you something in a moment. One of the security guys coming along here. Is it some sort of VIP they're protecting? No, evidently not. They've got the chapter house. I'll tell you why. Because monks, they used to meet in this room to have a chapter read to them. Remember, very few people were literate in those days. Not even all monks were literate. So they'd be read aloud to them. So cloisters, they could walk around here praying, and monks, they pray together about 5 times a day, could be up to 7 times a day, depending on the order. Nuns kind of do the same thing. So what was I going to say about orders and all the rest of it? There are many different orders of monks, and they have different lifestyles. They wear a habit, as in their robes. Now, monks don't have to wear that all the time. I used to work with some monks, and one of them liked to go jogging. He'd wear ordinary sports clothes for that purpose. But depending on what they're doing, they could wear civvies, they could wear lay dress, such as I'm wearing, because I'm a layman. I'm a member of the laity, as in religion is not my job. And with nuns, it's the same. So, because some orders are very enclosed, they hardly interact with the secular world at all. Others are very much out in the community. Some of them are mostly about teaching. They might be most about healthcare, helping the poor. They might just be about praying and scarcely interact with anyone outside the monastery. So that's that. The Benedictine monks, but they were closed down, as I said, in 1533. But one of those monks, he lived on a very long time, and he helped to sort of re-establish the order in France of English Benedictines. And then that was that. So this Benedictine order, who had been here at Westminster, they continued in France for centuries. After the French Revolution, they left France, they returned to England. they sailed to Hull, they went to Yorkshire, and at Ampleforth in North Yorkshire, there was a Catholic gentlewoman who wanted them. Now, what's the difference between a monk and a priest? Well, a priest is someone who can officiate at certain religious ceremonies. For example, Mass, then if you're a Catholic or possibly a High Anglican, or marriage and things like that. Only a priest can do those. The ceremony doesn't count if I were to do them, for instance. So some monks are priests as well. Most are not. Most priests are just priests, they're not monks. Most monks are just monks. But some people are both a monk and a priest at the same time. It's like being qualified as a doctor and a dentist. You could belong to both professions. But anyway, this Catholic woman wanted a Catholic priest to be ministering to her all the time, so she got them, and she got a few Benedictine monks, and eventually she left them some land and they died. And to set up an income to sustain the monastery, they founded the school, because monks have to eat like everybody else, despite their vows of poverty, chastity and obedience. Although in their particular case, it was more like of stability. So not owning things personally besides clothes, almost no personal effects, and owning things in common, meant to not be concerned with worldly wealth or that like that. I mean, I asked one monk, ironically, his father Jeremy Ciela, what makes a good monk? Someone said, someone who's not proud, someone who loves prayer and so forth. I said, I didn't think I'd be a suitable monk. He said, well, we don't think you would either, but which I take as an immense compliment. Anyway, there are many memorials around here to Westminster Abbey. So many coronations have been conducted here, so many kings and queens are buried in there, and there's also Poets' Corner memorials to many celebrated writers from the British Isles, indeed American writers who are resident here. Well, Henry James, who became a British subject shortly before he died in 1916. So that's that. So it's like a national Valhalla. Coronation will take place here. Prince William famously married Miss Kate Middleton in 2011 here in this self-same abbey. Oh, look at this. Look, a memorial to people who worked here to help those in Sudan. Oh, right. Unless God prevents or frustrates, nisi dominus frustra. That must be their motto. So the monks would trudge around here saying their prayers. And you might notice they've got loads of things in Latin. Well after the Reformation, perhaps surprisingly, they were putting things up, they were putting memorials up in Latin. In the 19th century, I noticed that's when it began to change into English, their memorials. Some people are buried even under our feet, okay? They're gradually rubbing away. So it's £20 to get in for an adult. If you want to go up to the galleries, you can. That's an extra £5 each for an adult. It being late January, there are hardly any tourists. Now, you might see that woman in the red cloak. So she obviously works here. She's something like a guide or a security guard. And they're quite officious. I was just speaking to some chap, telling him this and that, and she said, where's your blue badge? Because they're not a blue badge guide. Well, where's your thing? Because you can have this self-guiding audio item, and I hadn't bothered with one. So you're not allowed to guide people around here if you're not an official guide, and blah, blah, blah. So I rather disliked her tone. They didn't kick me out. But okay, that is her job, and I realised if we had loads of guides, then it would be a pain in the neck. People couldn't get around. So that's why it's not very busy. In August, we were jam-packed. So I'd suggest you come here as quickly as possible, as soon as possible in the morning before it gets really busy. That's that. Some people like to go in for grass rubbing here. It really repays the £5 to go up to the galleries, and there are loads of displays there of effigies that were used in funeral processions. You can look out on Parliament, have a sort of unique perspective on Parliament. I'm going now to the chapter house where the Benedictine monks used to meet. So that order of Benedictines that were here at Westminster Abbey, they still continue in Ampleforth, Yorkshire, and they've got a prior in Zimbabwe and elsewhere, and that's what's part of Ampleforth's coat of arms. It's got a bit of the coat of arms of Westminster Abbey and of the Anglo-Saxon kings, because Edward the Confessor was the last proper Anglo-Saxon king, not really counting what's his name, Harold Godwinson or Edgar the Atheling. Look at this. So here we see the coat of arms. Below is the Anglo-Saxon one. You see it for University College, Oxford. The martlets. Notice they're drawn without feet. It's a mistake. It's now considered correct. You see the Tudor rose, the white and red from the end of the Wars of the Roses. And then the royal coat of arms, the fleur de lis of France, the lion passant of England. I'm not sure what the yellow is about. So the martlets are mythical birds. Somebody forgot to draw the feet on, and that's become accepted. That's now the orthodox way to draw them. Certainly with regard to University College, Oxford, 4 or 5 are correct, either one. and because it goes back to this legend that King Alfred the Great founded University College Oxford, which is now accepted not to be true. Okay, so here we are, and you can see they've got stained glass windows. So it's a marvel of Norman architecture, but has to be renovated quite regularly. And then if you read these, and I shan't bother reading them for you, it tells you quite a lot about the history of the place. So the Reformation came along, and there was a lot of iconoclasm, smashing images and whitewashing over these things, because there were some splendid medieval paintings, and they were whitewashed over because it was felt to be Romish, as in there was hostility towards anything Roman Catholic, rediscovered in the 19th centuries and uncovered when the Church of England went through the Oxford movement. There was this movement for the Catholic Church to get back to its the Anglican Church to get back to its Catholic roots. That's not to say have the Pope as the head of the Church. No, they didn't want the Supreme Pontiff. The monarch would be the Supreme Governor, but to say you can call priest father, you can believe in sacraments, even if not 7 of them, you can reopen monasteries and convents, you can have monks and nuns, and so forth, and you can have the bells and the smells, and so on. A bit like, Arminianism, worship the Lord in the beauty of holiness, believing in making things colourful, positive, theatrical, and so forth, and celebrating artwork. So there are loads of stained glass windows, loads of coats of arms, and here is an image of Jesus Christ. So the monks obviously sitting around the edge of the chapter house, which gives you an idea how many could fit in here, a couple of hundred at its highest extent. So anything else about Westminster Abbey? Well, obviously it's splendid and utterly intriguing. It's a historical feast. My Russian student was blown away by it, saying he couldn't think of anything quite like it. And I was explaining that's because the United Kingdom since 1649 had almost no fighting. Well, the United Kingdom as such didn't exist till 1707. Almost no fighting in the United Kingdom. Fighting overseas a lot, but very little fighting here. I know there's 1688 a little bit. And I know they say there's a Jacobite rebellion, but that's why things didn't get destroyed, whereas in Russia things were razed to the ground, so many buildings were demolished, and so little of the architectural and artistic heritage has survived, certainly anything west of Moscow. Okay, so I've done a couple of rounds of the courtyard. I might head out in a bit. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing this, the Pyx chamber, PYX, Pyx being this little sort of golden plate that the communion things are kept on, the communion bread, the communion wafer. So I remember in Henry VIII there's a bit about where he hangs 2 of his soldiers who steal a pyx, as in a golden plate for holding the bread which is blessed at Mass. Thanks. So these huge, heavy medieval doors. Now I'm not sure if we're allowed to go down here or not. Are we not supposed to go down here? Oh, we are allowed to go down here. Okay, so it's hard by Westminster School. Westminster School is the most academic school in the kingdom. Gets more people into Oxford and Cambridge than any other school in the UK. And that's that. And they're called Queen's Scholars, those who get scholarships there, because Queen Elizabeth I founded it in the 16th century. And there's a lot of sort of schoolboy graffiti on some of these chairs, like coronation chairs and things like that. So a graffiter will often be the name of the boy who did it, but there have been girls there since the 1970s. Educated 70s, celebrated writers and composers, well, Henry Purcell or John Dryden, William Cooper, though Cooper is largely lost to memory these days. Andrew Lloyd Webber, Nick Clegg, but don't let that put you off that the Liberal Democrat Deputy Prime Minister went there. Okay, so anyway, so another little cloister here, and we'll get a unique view of things. And I like the medieval stonework. You can see it's all done by hand. Well, and look at the little cherub there. And oh yeah, and the Reverend Stolz, well maybe he or even she these days is Stolz, as in proud, to hold that position. Canon secretary. Canon not as in a piece of artillery. Canon with a single end in the middle is some sort of ecclesiastical position. I don't know what a prebendary and all these things are. A dean is some sort of job in a cathedral for a clergyman. Well, someone lived here for 90 odd years. College Gardens, which I think is obviously Westminster School. It's actually called Westminster School, not Westminster College, but often I saw these Latin inscriptions calling it a college church. So there are stones throw from Parliament, which is why so many prime ministers and so on were on there. Anyway, there was a chapel of St. Catherine here, part of the monastery infirmary where the monks were treated when they were ill. It was built from 1154 to 61. Anyway, so There's this doorway here from 1371. Now we'll have a look to where it used to be, the chancel down the end. I'll get out of the way of somebody's photo. How about that? How about that? What a hidden gem. You didn't see that one coming. That was a bit too bright. Ooh, it's a bit too bright. How do I change? I don't want it so bright. No, turn around the other way. Never mind. Because otherwise you'd be able to see. Can you make out? Because I can see a bit of Parliament there, that tower, but there you can see it because it was just too bright a moment ago. How about that? You didn't think it's in that angle. That's the Sovereign Tower. The Queen always goes in there. The Union flag is flying, which you probably can't make out from that angle. Not the Royal Standard because she's not there right now. Okay. What else about him and her? Well, wasn't that absolutely scintillating? What a treat, a hidden gem. Because I've been to Westminster Abbey thrice in my life. As I say, it costs a pretty penny. So out here, now I hope I'm allowed in this little bit. I don't think this is Westminster School, but nobody's told me not to be in here. Okay. So maybe you'll see it a bit there. Yeah, because it's not too bright. And just over that wall, that's where they're so often so-called College Green, even as in close to Westminster School. That's where they interview people for various political programs. Something big is going on. So actually I have an awful feeling this is Westminster School private property, so I better get off it. It's a public school, open to the public if you can pay. It costs about £40,000 a year. Boarding, you can be a day pupil, a lot of them are. So they've got girls and boys in almost equal numbers. That's Westminster School. I hold it in the highest possible regard. Anyway, so that's just about all from me. Anything else you'd like to know or find out? So state funerals take place there. The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is there. On the 11th of November 1919, the unknown soldier was buried there with all the circumstance and pomp that could be accorded for a state funeral. Because in the First World War, most families lost someone, even if it's a second-degree relative. So it was the bloodiest war in British history since the English Civil War. And the government felt we ought to have a grave to mark those men whose mortal remains were never found, because many families, they had no known grave for their loved one, or sometimes the grave was only the sea. So they went to a battlefield where lots of British soldiers had been killed in France. They found an unidentified corpse. They could deduce from his uniform that he was a Britisher, but that was that. So they brought him back and by ship, and obviously the train went to Victoria Station. Trains from the southern coast come into Victoria Station, and he and then was on the 10th of November, the next day, brought to Westminster Abbey and then interred with all this glory and deference. Now, King George V had been opposed to setting this up because it'll block the aisle, it'll be an obstruction. But nevertheless, the government insisted, and so he's there. And whoever he is, his tomb is always surrounded by these fake, obviously red poppies, because of Poppy Day and Remembrance Day. And John McCrae's celebrated poem where that Canadian Army doctor wrote, in Flanders fields where we lie beneath the sky, where poppies grow, row and row, so on. We shall not sleep in Flanders fields. If you break faith with failing hands, we throw the torch to ye. I've obviously got it very wrong. And now it's finally time to go out. That's just about enough for me. So I hope you enjoyed this impromptu tour of the cloisters of Westminster Abbey. I'm not permitted to film the actual one. I considered being a bit naughty and doing it anyway. There were so many splendid tombs and enormous memorials and huge effigies that were used in funeral processions for monarchs in centuries of yore. Poets' Corner, I don't think there's anything quite like it anywhere else in the world. Occasionally you see the choir from Westminster School coming in here. So I'll head out. These are the security guys. And out into this courtyard. Thank you so very much. So they provide their own security in these special uniforms with that coat of arms on their hat. Okay. And so this is this courtyard, and it's got a bit of church house here, as in the organisational headquarters of the Church of England. So that gives you a little bit of an idea about what it's like. And then all those adjoining buildings would be where the monks ate, drank, slept, and worship, because they didn't always worship in the abbey itself. So it's so gigantic. Right, so please continue your donations on Patreon, on PayPal. I need these to keep the channel going. If it wasn't that, we wouldn't be able to do this. I should point out that the monks were here from 960, but the actual place of worship that we see was only begun in the 1040s. So book me for online lessons in history, English literature, English as a foreign language, French, geography, let me see, religious studies, politics. I help people with dissertations, coursework, theses. I teach for things like 7+, 11+, GCSE, A-level, IB, law, and I'm a tour guide here in London, as I do know a little bit about London, as you've possibly observed. Okay, so yeah, see what that is over my shoulder? All right, so that is enough from the Dean's Yard, as in Dean. He's some sort of high-up official in a cathedral, always a clergyman. Could be she in the Church of England these days, of course. That's enough. Right, thank you everyone. Goodbye.